Welcome to the CopperSpice YouTube channel, and thanks for joining us. In this video, we are going to discuss how to document your project using DoxyPress. Using DoxyPress. We are going to start by defining what DoxyPress can do and how the DoxyPress app is used to generate a project file. Then we will talk about the most commonly used configuration settings for DoxyPress in the context of documenting a C++ project.
The main usage of DoxyPress is to generate documentation for your software project or generic documentation to define your business practices. These might be common procedures like building integration testing or what steps are required to set up a new development computer in your office. Comments can be associated with your source code, so they appear in conjunction with the class or method they pertain to. The comments are written in plain text and can contain normal HTML like tables, lists, and CSS styles. You can also use a subset of the Markdown syntax to format your comments. There is a debate over where the comments should be located. Some developers like the comments embedded in the source code, and others would rather have the comments in a separate file. There is no correct answer to this question, and neither approach affects the speed of running DoxyPress or the way output is generated. Another use of DoxyPress is to generate program flow graphs. We were talking to a C developer, and he was simply lost trying to figure out the overall structure of a large project he had inherited. We suggested he run DoxyPress and let it parse the source files. This gave him an HTML output which showed the overall structure of the program, as well as graphical representations of the relationships between the various functions in the program. It also showed him where there were areas of the program which had design flaws.
DoxyPress is an open source project. We release pre-built binaries for Unix, Windows, and OS X. Full source code is available from our download site and from GitHub. If you're interested in contributing to the project in any way, please clone the Git repo and submit a pull request. No change is too small, and large ones are wonderful. This is a list of the supported computer languages DoxyPress can document. If your documentation does not contain any source code, you can still use DoxyPress to generate cross-referenced HTML documentation. Our CopperSpice overview docs is an example of documentation which is based only on text input and no source code. In terms of C++ source code, any construct used in modern C++ design can be parsed and documented. Source code, which is located in a particular visibility section, like protected, will be appropriately documented as such. You can disable documenting private members to hide implementation details from your public API documentation. If your comments are not adjacent to the source code and located in a separate file, you do not need to mark anything to indicate the visibility section. DoxyPress parses your source code and will know which section to place the documentation in. A cool feature in DoxyPress is support for autolinks. If you use the name of a class, a method, or a function in your comments, the name will automatically appear as a link. You can disable autolinks completely or suppress them per name. Suppressing a link might be of value if the same name appears multiple times in one area of your documentation, and you really don't want a plethora of links showing up.
While HTML is the most common output format, DoxyPress supports many other formats as well. Multiple formats can be selected simultaneously, so you do not need to run the program several times to generate different outputs. The HTML output can be used directly or to generate other formats like the compiled HTML help or documentation used in Eclipse. So DoxyPress is really just a command line program which uses a configuration file containing various settings to define how your documentation should be generated. There are lots of different ways to generate documentation, and most of the settings are available just so you can have optimum control over the output the way you want it. The number of options available in DoxyPress can be daunting, but most of the settings have sensible defaults. The best approach is usually to initially use the default settings. Then, as you see areas in your documentation you would like to alter, change one or two settings at a time and see what the results are.
DoxyPress has several built-in style sheets to define the CSS, headers, and the footers used for HTML output. There are also style sheets for RTF and LaTeX. The best way to change the styling of the output is to export the built-in ones from DoxyPress. This will give you the names of the existing rules, and you can override them as necessary. Any new rules should be added to your custom style sheets. In your project file, there are options you will need to set in order to specify which custom style sheets should be included.
There is also a layout file which gives you complete control over which elements should appear in your documentation. For the DoxyPress documentation, we wanted to rename the page section, so we modified the layout file as shown to change the button to say Overview. The other sections give you the ability to hide any particular element of the output, change the name, or reorder anything. For example, in our CopperSpice API docs, we changed the section which would normally be called Public Member Functions to read Public Methods. This gives you complete control over how your documentation should look, and you are not stuck with the default terminology. In addition to the class section, there are also sections to define the layout of file, group, and namespace elements.
This is a short list of a few key attributes in the generated output. Some of the features in DoxyPress are specific to a particular output format, while others apply to every output format. One of the more valuable features we previously mentioned is the inheritance graphs, which show the relationship between classes. One of the nice things you can do is click on an element in a graph to move around in the hierarchy.
There are two different options you have to choose from when documenting C++ code with DoxyPress. You can use the original Lex parser, which is the default, or you can enable the clang parser, and the Lex parser will not be used. Using clang for parsing your C++ is slower, however it is far more accurate. Depending upon the size of your project, the speed of running DoxyPress and using clang may not be significant. Clang has several advantages over the parsing done by Lex. For example, let's say you have a method which is virtual because its parent method was declared virtual. If you are using clang, then no matter how you document the child method, it will automatically be documented as virtual. This happens because clang is actually parsing your source code, and we can take advantage of the information available in the full syntax tree. This is also why DoxyPress may display syntax errors in your source code. We are actually using clang to parse your code, and it must be syntactically valid. Although DoxyPress can be run from a command prompt, using the DoxyPress app may be a bit easier. It is a GUI front end that ensures the JSON project file is generated correctly. You can run DoxyPress from the Run tab within DoxyPress app and watch the status of what is going on. The status output is clean and descriptive. If an error is detected, the error will show up in red for added visibility. We also have a find option so you can search in the status output. This is very convenient if you want to search for a particular file name or output format name to see how your documentation is being generated.
In order to run DoxyPress, you must pass it the name of a valid JSON project file. This file contains the settings or fields, which we refer to as tags. The only tag which must appear in this JSON file is the one for the DoxyPress format, which is a version number. Currently, this value must be 1. However, it may be updated in the future. All of the other tags in the JSON file are optional, and their default values will be used by DoxyPress. Obviously, this is not very useful. Most likely, you'll want to define several of the other tags. If you open DoxyPress app and select File, New, then a complete JSON project file will be created with the default values.
One of the components of documentation to be aware of is the brief description. The most common place a brief description will be found is at the top of the class documentation. The brief description of a class also appears in any list where class names are displayed. A brief description for a method will appear near the declaration of that method. If you have repeat brief description turned on, it will also appear at the beginning of the detailed documentation. There are two ways to create the text for a brief description. You can explicitly set the text using the brief command, or you can turn on one of the auto-brief tags. The auto-brief tag will extract the first sentence of the documentation and use this for the brief description, and not place it in the detailed documentation. If you want the first sentence to appear in both parts of documentation, turn on the repeat brief description tag. Of the 277 supported tags, 48 are displayed on the build configuration screen. The default values for most of these will be sufficient. If you want to see every entity in your code, turn on Extract All to parse and output everything, regardless of whether a particular member, method, or function has any documentation. Some of these tags will generate additional pages in your output, like the deprecated list. Other tags, like the auto-link support that we mentioned, will change what your output looks like.
There are tag options which allow you to specify how you want to handle error messages and if they should be redirected to an external file. There are also tags which are used to set the location of your input source files, and another one to specify recursively searching folders for these files. There are other tags which can be used to specifically exclude a folder, a single file, or files with a particular extension.
If you enable the source code tag, then your source will be included in the documentation output. The preprocessing macros are very helpful when you have platform-specific code and want to ensure all of it is documented. You simply add the #define name which was used in your code to the predefined macro tag and optionally set a value. If the built-in class diagrams are not sufficient, or you want more advanced graphs, you can configure DoxyPress to use the dot program.
The DoxyPress program was based on an existing open source project. We inherited a number of problems and documentation issues which have been addressed and resolved. Over the last 3 years, we have migrated the project to use modern C++, and we continue to refine and improve the codebase. The documentation for DoxyPress can be found on our website. To get an idea of the work we've been doing, please check out the timeline located in the DoxyPress documentation. You can also review our recent changes in the GitHub repository.
For more information about DoxyPress, CopperSpice, and the other projects that we maintain, please visit our website at www.copperspice.com.
Thanks for watching, and we hope you found the content of value. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave a comment on this video or send us a private email.
Please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and come back in 2 weeks for our next video.